Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. So let's knock this out. First question. Jason, could you explain the key flaws of the glycemic index system, which I have said is a very antiquated system? If I remember correctly, in the past you've mentioned that it has some issues. I was just wondering if, into detail a bit, is it useful for diabetics and just has no application for healthy people, or is it even useless for diabetics as well? Thanks. It's mostly useless for diabetics as well. All right, there's a few flaws in it. First of all, the glycemic index really only applies in the fasted state. We've done all the research on it when we created it is only for people who are fasted. If you had previous meals that day, the glycemic index goes out the window because the GI on everything that you eat goes down. So the more food you've had in a day, the lower the glycemic index becomes on future foods that you eat. Number two, it doesn't really even measure just the carbs in isolation. It has to do with mixed food. So foods that have fat already added to them, particularly large amounts, tend to have really low glycemic indexes. In fact, a lot of you might think of as oats or brown rice as low GI carbs. Those are actually moderate GI carbs on the glycemic index scale, whereas in generally ice cream, full-fat ice cream, French fries, pizza, foods like that that have a lot of extra fat added in, tends to be on the lower end. They'll be lower than brown rice or oats. So there's some problems there. And then number three, because those are just so specific foods, as soon as you start mixing other foods in, the GI starts changing on everything. For example, you could try to compare white rice and brown rice, but who eats brown rice and white rice by themselves? What happens when you start mixing beans with them? The whole GI of the whole mixture goes down. You start adding, say, some olive oil and some chicken breast or some steak to that rice, and you're going to find that white rice and brown rice start becoming similar anyway. So there's a lot of problems with using this system. It doesn't really work. It was kind of a novel idea 30 years ago, but it's not really as useful today as you would think it is. All right, next question. From a nutritional stance, how do you approach the day before a heavy single attempt? I tend to eat as large of a surplus as I can comfortably stomach, crap load, Just wondering your stance on this, is if there is a point of diminished returns as such, in your opinion. No, I don't do anything special before I try to hit heavy singles. In fact, you guys know certain portions of the year, particularly when getting ready for a meet, I do Bulgarian training. I hit training maxes every day when I'm doing that type of training. And the answer is no. Your heavy singles shouldn't require anything special for energy. Training maxes are training maxes. You shouldn't be hitting competition maxes in the gym anyways. You save all out maxes for competition. There's no reason or even strength benefit to really fatigue yourself that much to try to hit a true third attempt for a competition in the gym. You shouldn't be missing lifts in the gym. You should be hitting lifts even with your training maxes that you know you're going to make, even if they're very difficult. You should never attempt a lift in the gym you're not going to make. So accordingly, your nutrition shouldn't vary. Maxes or training maxes are based upon how you feel day to day. And if you happen to be cutting right now, then continue to eat a deficit. So I don't know why you would think that you need to eat differently for your actual training, because again, you shouldn't be hitting true 1 rep maxes outside of a competitive environment. There's not really a benefit to you to do that other than to show off at the gym. And I guess if you just want to show off at the gym instead of competition, then go ahead and carb load the night before. But I don't know what you think you're going to gain out of this in terms of getting stronger. Remember, your goals in the gym should be to develop strength, not demonstrate it. All right, next question. I find the fact that the percentage of 1 rep max on the press is the same as that on the bench at all weeks of the intermediate program unnecessarily difficult. A complaint shared by the majority of the comments in the program thread. I have barely been able to hit it despite 5 or more minutes rest between sets on the 4x10 week, plus other plans for an intermediate program number 2 to come out. No, I don't have plans for an intermediate 2 to come out. I will probably get one done eventually. It might be a year from now, but yeah, it'll probably happen. I've been releasing a couple programs a year now at this point. As far as your other question, you guys aren't testing them right. I think what's happening, if you're really struggling with that, you aren't doing the test day correctly to determine your maxes. When you come in and you test it, I don't mean that you come in and take a full hour to test everything. You walk in and you test them back to back to back. Meaning if you've just done squat, bench press, row, overhead press, I don't want that to be 30 minutes for you to test those 5 rep or 6 rep maxes in order to determine your percentages. You need to do them back to back. So you're in a fatigued state, because if you just did a quick warm up on the squat, tested your 5 rep max, you go and bench, do a couple warm up sets, get to your 5 or 6 rep max, do a test, you're going to be very fatigued at that point. If you do the rows, a minute later you come in and do 2 warm-up sets of rows, and then 60 seconds or 2 minutes later you do your max on that. You've just done the bench max test 5 minutes or less ago before you go to the overhead press. You should still be fatigued from that, just like you're going to be fatigued from the higher volume work in the training, because you've hit a rep max. You're going to be tired, so it shouldn't be the same as your overhead press fresh max. It's going to be a bit lower. So accordingly, you should be able to handle that. If not, then you've got a work capacity problem, and it means you're probably not in good conditioning shape, or you didn't build work capacity through high enough volume training as a novice lifter. If you had run something like my novice program, your work capacity would probably be a bit higher, and you would do a little better on this. So those are the things that are being considered, that you're not testing fatigued, or maybe you haven't built appropriate work capacity up yet, which means you might not have done the best approach for your novice training. Maybe you should go back and run a novice program again for another month or two to build your work capacity back up. Now, as far as the other thing to consider there, just like I've said on a lot of these programs before, if you're hitting failures on a lift like that and it's getting to be too much, then scale them back 5%. But that intermediate program is intended to be a difficult program. That is basically a competitive athletes type off-season program. So I expect you to push yourself hard. I expect it to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. If you want something easy, don't run an athletic program. Run something for the more recreational lifter. All right, next question. The UFC's new drug testing policy says that all fighters on the roster will be randomly tested 5 times a year. If this is truly random, can this testing make a significant dent in PED use? No, it won't make one fuckload of difference. Guys, 5 random tests a year. 5 random tests a year is nothing. Nothing. A moron could get past that, particularly since they're not showing up and testing them at 2 a.m. and slapping them awake randomly at their house. They're testing them during normal business hours. It is very easy to use a ton of drugs and get around that. Keep in mind, you can't even test for some of the best stuff out there. Some of the most anabolic drugs in existence, there's no test for. Like insulin, mechanogrowth factor, you can't even test for those drugs. Then you factor in the fact that they could pop suspension and growth hormone at night. And there's even new ways now to use peptides to mask growth hormone use in the morning that can bypass the test. So these guys can basically pretty much run growth hormone, they can run mechanogrowth factor, and they could run test suspension. And believe me, if the doses are sufficient, that is an extremely anabolic stack that's going to recomposition them, and it's going to dramatically improve the recovery. Dramatically improve the recovery. They could run a stack like that, and you could random test them, random Monday through Friday, 52 weeks a year. So you give them 250 random tests in the middle of the day. Not even so random, and they'll still come up clean. It's fucking stupid. Drug testing is an absolute farce, and it's just downright moronic. It makes sports a big fake-ass dog and pony show. It's not good. That 5 drug tests a year random is not going to do anything. All right, next question. Jason, there is conflicting evidence on both sides. What is your personal opinion on dairy, all things from butter, milk, to protein powders? You mentioned many people are intolerant, but what if an individual handles it fine? Thanks. I think that dairy fat in excess could become a problem. Like if you're eating cheese as your main fat source, you're not going to get a balanced fat profile because it's primarily saturated fat. Saturated fat in moderation is perfectly fine. Saturated fat should not be your primary fat source. You need to be getting a lot more monounsaturated and things, and there are other even animal source foods that are dramatically lower in saturated fat. So if say you're eating cheese or butter for your main fat source, that could be a problem, but nobody's really going to do that. Just giving you a hypothetical. Outside of that, if you don't have lactose intolerance or casein allergy, I don't really see an issue medically or health-wise for people on dairy. People who get a little bloated from dairy, like, well, it bloats me a little bit, I don't look quite as lean. Well, you're lactose intolerant, that's why. It doesn't cause bloating in people who don't have that issue. And I myself, I'm personally lactose intolerant, so I can't really handle milk that well. I can do lactate milk, and I tend to get whey proteins that have the lactose filtered out better. And that's why I'm very picky in my brands. The MTS does that okay for me. Optimal Nutrition does that okay for me. But a lot of other brands, I can't really stomach them. And it's just my lactose intolerance. That's one of the few reasons I went with mark in them because he actually produces one that my stomach can handle, and you guys have seen me drink it. Believe me, there's a lot of cheap proteins I wouldn't do that with. And it's just because the lactose is lower. And for me, that's a big selling point, because I can't drink Walmart protein or bulk powders or any of that stuff. They give me diarrhea. But it's because I'm personally lactose intolerant. But if you're not, then it's probably not going to be an issue for you. It's fine. Next question. Doing high bar squats exclusively leaves some lagging development in the hamstrings. Yeah, if that's your only lower body exercise, you're going to have lagging hamstrings. But so if you're doing a low bar squat, the amount of hamstring activation versus quad activation between the two is a lot less of a difference than you would think it is. No squat is going to hammer the hamstrings really hard. Are they work? Yes. Can you get hamstring development from squatting? Yes, absolutely. But it's not going to be anywhere near what you could get. So if you're doing high bar squats or any squat exclusively for your hamstring work, yes, your hamstring and posterior chain isn't going to be as developed as you might want it. You need to be doing some sort of deadlift in there also, or if you're not going to do a deadlift and you're going to do tons of squats, at least do some glute ham raises would be my recommendation. But no, squats alone in general are not going to give you sufficient hamstring development. But picking your style of squat based upon hamstring development accordingly shouldn't be a factor. It needs to be your other overall goals that should determine your squat type. And yeah, I am a fan of the high bar squat. All right, next question. What's an example day of eating for you? Do a full day of eating video. I really don't like the full day of eating videos. I think they're creepy and weird, and I think people who watch YouTubers full days of eating videos regularly, I don't know, that just seems a little obsessive to me, as far as like people really wanting to get that far into people's personal lives to watch everything they eat in a day. It just seems weird to me. I don't understand that. It's like a fetish thing. I don't know. It just seems weird. I've never done that. I would never sit down and watch someone's full day of eating video. I've never done it. It's just not interesting to me. And it just seems a little creepy. Now, that being said, what full day of eating? Okay, for me, for example, yesterday, I had a couple scoops of protein in my coffee. Then a little later, I ate some bacon and eggs. I only ended up using 2 eggs, and then, half a cup of egg whites for my eggs afterwards. Post-workout, I kind of had the same thing again, eggs. And then for dinner, I went to a place, I had barbecue, I had ribs, I had grilled chicken, and I made myself a giant salad of romaine lettuce and a bunch of veggies in it. And that was pretty much a full day of eating for me yesterday. So basically 4 meals if we count the coffee and the protein shakes, about an hour before I had my pre-workout breakfast. So protein shakes and coffee, bacon and eggs, half egg whites, half whole eggs. Same meal again post-workout, and then for dinner I had barbecue, which was ribs, baked whole, like half of a chicken, and a gigantic salad made with romaine lettuce and no croutons. So that's a sample day of eating for me. That's pretty typical, particularly if I'm going to go out and eat something, or if I go out and eat somewhere else, it might be a steak or something. But I do right now just a lot of bacon and eggs and green veggies. And when I go out, I tend to get stuff like barbecue or steak. All right, next question. What's your take on doing drop sets for direct arm work just to save time? I already spent 2 hours at the gym, which often makes me skip direct arm work because I don't want to waste any more time with just arms. However, if I did it, for example, 3 drop sets for triceps and right after 3 sets for biceps, which would take up to a minute, it wouldn't be a big deal. What do you think? I'm just not a fan of drop sets in general. I don't like the idea of dropping the weight dramatically on any exercise. I know we're talking arms and it's just metabolic fatigue at that point. But if I wanted to save time and I wanted to finish a muscle off at the end of a session, I would probably do, which I actually do, about 3 sets of high reps with 60 seconds between. It takes you 3 minutes to do something like that. There's no need to drop set, or if you're even in a bigger hurry for time, just do rest pause training. Pick a weight you can do for 10 reps, get to 10 reps, get to close to failure, rest a few seconds, do 3 more reps, rest a few seconds, do 3 more reps, rest a few seconds, do 2 more reps, bam, you're done. You've gone beyond failure. You've got all the metabolic benefits you'd get from a drop set, but you did it without reducing the weight. I just don't like the idea of cutting weight back on any exercise because I'm focused on strength. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.